for Thursday, June 29th, and invite you to join with us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the temporary secretary please take the roll? After I do the fire announcement. In case of fire, there are two ways to exit the chambers. To my left, you do through the double doors, turn left and down a flight of stairs and outside the building. Or perhaps the best and quickest way is to the rear of the chambers through the double doors and outside of the building. In either case, once you're outside of the building, please walk a safe distance away from the building. Now, you'll take the roll.
Charles Dern.
Here.
Elizabeth Ballard, absent. Nick Lefakis, absent. Charles Ladd.
Here.
Mary Scott, here. Linda DeGray, absent. Richard Suzak, absent. Virginia Higley.
Here.
Okay. Four are present, which is legal for us to take action. New business, reading of the legal notice for XZA 17-01.
Legal notice for Infield Planning and Zoning Commission. The commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, June 29th, 2017, beginning at 7 p.m. in the council chambers, 820 Infield Street, Enfield, Connecticut, concerning the following. XZA number 17-01, zoning text change to section 5.10.1.14, Article 5, Business District Regulations. New section to be added, more than one principal building on a lot. Complete text amendment available in the planning office and the office of the town clerk. Dated the 17th day of June, 2017. Charles Dern, Chairman. Information is available at the Infield Planning Office, Infield Town Hall. Posted in the Journal Inquirer, June 17th, 2017, and June 26th, 2017.
We have a notice from CROG that they had received it and sent it back, and of course out to the planners of Summers and Ellington, East Windsor, Suffield, and Windsor Locks. Anything from the commission for,
No.
no questions? You want to present this, Roger?
We'll put it up on the screen so the folks at home can be able to read it as well.
Need it on that screen.
Basically, the issue that we have here is that the definition of a lot under your zoning regulations refers to one principal building and one accessory building. And historically, in the BL zone, we have had more than one principal building built. And so what we wanted to do is remove any ambiguity on that, but at the same time, if we're going to allow a more than one principal building in a BL zone, we wanted to put in the extra review of the commission by special permit, so that it may not be appropriate in all instances to have more than one principal building. So what we drafted is a short paragraph, which hopefully John will have up in a minute, which shows that the commission by special permit can allow more than one principal building and on a lot by special permit, and then we list the two standards that the commission would have to find. One would be that the overall site must be consistent with the standards of the district, and basically that would mean such things as setbacks and buffer areas and protection for neighboring properties. And So you could only get the more than one principal building provided if you weren't able to meet the standards of the district. So we're not waiving any standards of the district. We're just saying that if the size of the lot is such that you can still have your traditional standards, then you could apply for that. And the other is that the commission, in reviewing the site plan, would determine that the building sizes and locations are consistent with the design standards of the district. So we wanted to make it clear that the standards of the district are still there, but there may be cases in which you would have two principal uses. Now, you could say, well, what's an example of two principal uses? You may have a restaurant and a bank as an example of two principal uses on the same building. And I think if you go around town, we can all find examples where that actually does exist. So I don't think we're changing anything. What we're doing is providing the appropriate standards and clarifying under what conditions you could have more than one building. And that we're going to put it up so the folks at home.
It's up, not legible, but up.
Well, it takes a while for the.
The clean
You
and
got to
clear.
hit the other thing to turn that on, right?
No, it's up there.
It's up. It's
Not legible.
It's clear over here. I don't know why it's not on there.
So that's basically it.
The public is going to see it on television.
yeah,
She said it's okay.
yeah, it's probably.
I can
clear
read
on
it
the
from
screen.
here over there on that one.
It's not on the TV though.
It's just not, you can't read it very well on the TV, but it looks clear over here.
Okay.
We got it right here anyway, so we can.
Is there-
Right.
Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak in favor or against this application? Anyone in the public who'd like to speak in favor or against the application? Last call to speak in favor or against this application. Hearing none, I'll close this public hearing. And Roger,
So if you're comfortable voting tonight, all we need is a motion to approve with an effective date, and the effective date is usually like 10 days from tonight, and that gives us time to.
don't they have 15 days to appeal?
There is an appeal period
All right.
as well, so
And we're just approving, or we're just voting on what's here that we got in our packet, correct?
Yeah,
Right, you're voting on-
Just this change is the only change to it. This is what's gone to Capital Region.
10 days? Doing 10 or 15?
15.
Well,
So you're adding a new section 5.10.1.14 to your regulations.
I'd like to make a motion to approve XZA 17-01, zoning text change to section 5.10-1.14, Article 5 Business District Regulations, with an effective date of 15 days from today.
Second,
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Unanimous, no opposed and no abstentions. Okay, the acting secretary, please read the roll and read the legal notice and then read the roll for XZA 1702.
Legal notice for Enfield Planning and Zoning Commission. The commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, June 29th, 2017, beginning at 7 p.m. in the council chambers, 820 Enfield Street, Enfield, Connecticut, concerning XZA number 17-02, zoning text change to Article 6, industrial districts, Section 6.30.2. Activities limited to enclosed buildings will be replaced with Section 6.30.2, activities limited to enclosed buildings and limited outdoor storage provisions. Complete text amendment available in the planning office and the office of the town clerk, dated 17th of June, 2017. Charles Duran, the chairman. This was published in the Journal Enquirer on June 17th, 2017, and June 26th, 2017. Charles Duran,
Here.
Elizabeth Ballard, absent. Nick Lefakis, absent. Charles Ladd,
Yes.
Mary Scott, here. Linda DeGray, absent. Richard Suzak, absent. And Virginia Higley.
Here.
Roger.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, what we've been finding over the last few months is that we have a very lively commercial and industrial market in Enfield, and in some ways we're at a competitive disadvantage with other communities because when we're locating businesses to allow a certain amount of an industrial building's property to have outdoor storage properly screened is something that many of our surrounding towns do allow. The provision in the regulations at this point in time says that all business servicing or processing except for off-street parking shall be conducted within completely enclosed buildings. So if you read that, you would say you can't have any outdoor storage at all. So we took a look at the section of your regulations regarding accessory structures, accessory buildings, and so forth. An accessory building is limited to 20% of your rear property yard, and 20%, that's the magic of where 20% came from. So it lines up with, you can either put an accessory building up that would take up 20%, or you could have outdoor storage in 20% of your rear yard. But there were a couple of provisions that we wanted to make sure of. One is that it was properly screened, so the provision in there that it is screened from public view, and that's people going up and down the street, and that it be limited to uses associated with on-site users only, so you can't have somebody renting out their backyard to somebody else to store stuff. So if you're using the inside of the building and you have need to store materials that wouldn't make sense to be putting them in and taking them out, putting them in and taking them out, then we would allow 20% of the rear yard for that. So it must be directly connected to those inside the building. And then the fourth one was raised in the workshop, in which this was discussed, which is that the 20% should be like defined areas and not like scattered around the property or throughout the site. So again, 20% outdoor storage, properly screened, not scattered about, not visible from the street, directly connected to what takes place inside the building, is a regulation that is found in many zoning regulations, and for that reason we would recommend it.
Any questions from the commission?
No, it looks very well thought out and well proposed. I'm comfortable with voting on Roger's and Jennifer's work.
Roger, if under this, I'm just saying, would this allow, if I wanted to run a automobile recycling facility, I could now do this?
Like a towing lot? that.
Oh, let's say I wanted to smash cars and scrap metal. junkyard.
No. No, that would come under your junkyard
Okay,
requirement.
so we have another article that would cover it.
Right.
Any other questions? Okay, anyone in the public would like to speak in favor or against? Attorney Fahey.
Oh, and Mr. Chairman, the Attorney Fahey did provide written comments, which I did put
We
at
have
your
them, yep.
seats as well.
Yep. I have it right in front of me here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. For the record, Attorney Thomas Fahey, I have a law office in Windsor Locks, and I'm speaking here this evening on behalf of John Petronella, an owner of an industrial piece of property to which this regulation would be applicable. And speaking mostly in support of it, but I'm speaking here to ask the commission to consider a couple of tweaks. I appreciate the work that the planner, Roger O'Brien, has done in putting this together. I think it's much needed because, as he pointed out, there was a hole in your regulation in that actually inconsistency where you had an industrial zone where everything had to be done inside a building. And as you know, industrial uses, specifically some of the ones that are permitted in your industrial zone, don't lend itself to activities that are totally within an industrial building, such as the storing of construction equipment, for instance. And you all know the property, and another one would be truck terminals, which is the property across the street from Mr. Petronella's facility, which has always had, whether it's roadway or whatever the different names are, where there were many, many trucks parked outside as they should be because that's the nature of the business. Enfield, like most towns, only has a certain limited amount of industrial property where these activities could take place. And what I think this addresses is, at least it recognizes that outdoor storage is permitted. And I, like Roger, have looked at a number of communities that have similar provisions and have represented communities that had provisions in their regulations as well. And if you saw my comments, I think the one thing I added was a definition, which I think would be helpful to the regulation. I don't think it's inconsistent with what Roger's proposed. I think that what the regulation does, I think it emphasizes that the most important thing with respect to this regulation is the screening, and that is the storage activities need to be screened. And the best form of screening is really natural screening, a dense, either a fence or a vegetative buffer. And if you have the screening, I don't know that I don't know what makes the number 20% so important. The reason I say that is because the industrial parcels, whether it's an Enfield or something else, they're usually in certain areas, and they're not like, generally not small little lots. They generally have some size to them. And if in fact and so each has to be considered as a site-specific matter. It's a special permit requirement so that your commission can look at each site and to see what its capacity is. In some cases, 20% might work excellently. In fact, they might not be able to use 20% because the site might be too small. But in another case, you might have a very large site where 20% would be a limitation because it could accommodate much more without there being any noticeable impact on the public because it would be screened. And what I see that I left out one word in my recommendation, and what I think would perhaps be more acceptable is if it said increased limitation from 20% up to 40% of the rear outdoor space, so that an applicant could show that he could put 35%, whatever it may be, and still, and with the screening and whatnot, not have any deleterious impact, because I can't imagine what other impact that could have other than the look and feel, because, you've been hearing a lot over the many years about looking at RV vehicles and things like that parked in people's driveways, and the years where you had all the, and Jenny, I know, was around doing enforcement when it was the big trucks that were in the driveways and things of that nature. Well, they got to have someplace to go. This is where they can go. And again, with the proper screening, no one's going to see them. The other thing I added was, and these, by the way, these didn't come from thin air. These I grabbed from different regulations, different towns. Incidentally, many towns don't have any number. They don't have 24. They don't put any limitations on it. They just take care of it as a site plan matter to make sure it's properly screened. Where I say natural topography, which reduces the visibility, may be considered as partially or fully meeting the screening requirement, is, in other words, if you have a dense buffer, whether it's 3/4 away around or 50%, whatever, you may not need to add other trees on top of it. But that's something that you got to look on a case-by-case basis to see what's there. So I think that what I'm saying here is pretty consistent with the regulation, and that's why, and we certainly support it because we think it's absolutely necessary. And it goes beyond just John's property. I think Roger was trying to achieve something that would obviously be helpful to many other industrial owners. And by the way, it doesn't mean that this doesn't exist already. There's a lot of existing storage going on outside that always has been, and because it probably started in many cases before there was even a regulation on it. But obviously, going forward, those that are entering into new use would have this available to them to see what the guidelines were. And those that already have operations and are conducting the activity would be bound by this should they have any additional or changing of uses on their properties. And with that, unless you have any questions for me, John wants to add a few words.
Any questions for Tom? Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to speak in favor or against? Is 20%.
Good evening, John Petronella. I am one of the owner authorized representatives for 1654 King Street in Enfield. I'm also a resident of Enfield. In echoing Mr. Fahey's comments as well, with our property, it's zoned I-2. In an I-2 zone, the reason why we purchased that, it's the former Connecticut Light and Power Facility, to be familiar with it. We purchased that because our construction business was in a commercial zone at one time. So 20 years ago when we bought that, it was zoned and permitted for construction use. And we were allowed to keep construction equipment and construction materials and so forth out there. The 20% we looked at doesn't seem to, at times, it's just not gonna make it. And in a view over town, over this past week when I drove around town looking at other Industrial 2 sites and uses for Industrial 2 specifically, out on Shaker Road, there's a truck parts recycling center out there. There's an asphalt plant out there. There's a concrete batch plant out there. In our area, there's a new truck dealership that's there. There's a brickyard that's out there that's got a lot of outside storage. I see a lot of those businesses having a lot of difficulty meeting this criteria. In fact, I think that this proposal, as written, would put it in a non-conforming use. So I really feel that, especially in the I-2 zone, the 20% is very light. And as Mr. Fahey also echoed, there's provisions in your zoning that don't allow small businesses such as landscapers or large trucks to park in their homes. And a lot of those businesses are home-based, and they're always looking for places to park their equipment. I get calls all the time on that, and I refuse them all the time because some of the in and out traffic that I just don't want to participate with. But it is a hardship on a lot of small businesses, and they're scrambling and going elsewhere too. But again, I ask that you look at the amendments that Mr. Fahey had sent in and proposed that to increase that from 20 to 40%, and also the natural topography amendment, and with respect to how outside storage is defined. Again, we are a facility that has multiple buildings on the site. There's 3 of them actually, and I just ask you to consider those. If you have any questions for me.
Just as a point of interest, I think you've made some very good points, but just so the public knows, landscaping is not a home occupation, so they wouldn't be parking their trucks there even if this passed.
Well, to answer that, I know some landscapers that run their businesses out of their homes and so forth, but they're just
Right.
looking for a place to park their
Right.
equipment,
But,
a trailer loaded with equipment and so forth.
But not the multiple trucks and employees that they have. That's not an allowable home use.
Well, no, they're not.
saying
They're looking to park them elsewhere, and they're parking them wherever they can outside of their homes. But
Right.
when I say home base, they don't have an office. They don't need an office. They're kind of running their office out of their basement or whatever, doing
Yes.
all their bookwork and
Yes.
paperwork.
Yes, I just
So
didn't want to
they-
get any new landscapers
Yeah.
coming into town thinking we were picking on them.
Yeah, that's correct. I understand. Yeah.
Any questions, any further questions?
Yes. Some sites, not unlike yours, have more than one business on the site. So with this 40 or 20%, whichever we do, would that encompass all of them having separate areas for their stuff, or how would that work?
Well, as I understand it, that percentage would be
Shouldn't be for each.
elimination of all.
Accumulation.
Of everything on site, yeah, not just, one business and for
So
this
you would
and so
just
forth.
say, oh, you got this little part over here, and you got this part.
Right.
Okay.
Any other further questions for him? Okay, Roger? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Basically, the standards that apply to the consideration of zoning amendment is that when you advertise something and you go to public hearing, the commission can make it more restrictive without going back to public hearing and restarting the process all over again. But if you were to expand it, so for example, if you were to based on public comment, reduce it to 18% and not 20%, you would be fine and you could adopt that. But if you're going to expand it to 40, you would in effect kill this particular proposal, and we'd have to start all over again and resend it back to the CROG and so forth. So I'm not sure that that's
Roger, this
really what we would want to do.
This is based on lot coverage.
Right, and
And-
the other thing is,
But
the
20
notion that it's a bigger lot, if you got a bigger lot, whatever, but think about that, if you have a discrete amount of outdoor storage, the bigger lot you have, the less percentage of the lot it is. So the same amount of outdoor storage on a bigger lot is the thing. With respect to the gentleman's site, this calculation based upon a review with his own site engineer, this would allow what is currently there to be compliant. With respect to national topography, I think that natural topography, the commission would be well within its means on a special permit to consider that part of the screening.
We always have.
Yeah, so I don't think you need to do any amendment for that one.
I
You're
think you'd
good.
be getting too specific
Yeah.
on number 3. 'cause,
And then with respect
so-
to 5, I don't know what happened to 2 and 4, but with respect to 5, you didn't go to public hearing with a definition of outdoor storage, so you can't be like adding something now that would, in fact, broaden the notion of what outdoor storage was. With respect to tractor trailers, you have a provision in your regulations for trucking terminals and so forth, so that would not be, tractor trailers or trucking terminals would be covered under an outside section of the regulations. Then the motion was made of RVs. I'm not sure what the RV would be connected to that went on inside the building. So one would have to take that into consideration. And then finally, the notion of we would be making a lot of stuff non-conforming. Under your current regulations, all outdoor storage is non-conforming.
Well,
And
we've
so,
allowed, I could think of some group of pipes that are
Yeah.
allowed down at the old, yeah.
yeah, but I mean,
That we
all
have
of that
done it.
stuff that's there is like grandfathered non-conforming, if it's
Well, that was
if it was
recently
put
done,
there under previous. But so
It is.
the fact that
They
you would
needed it
allow
because
20% now actually provides some relief if they were moving forward. And plus, you have that section of the regulations with respect to non-conforming uses and addressing non-conforming uses. So I would say that if that you can adopt this regulation, and if at some point in time you find that it's working so well that you're comfortable increasing it to more than 20%, then, you could do that. I
we've
don't
done
think
that
natural
before.
topography is going to be an issue. And as far as the definition, I would be concerned with, if you look at short-term customer and staff parking has never been considered outdoor storage anyhow, so that's not an issue. I don't know what areas covered by a roof is, so does that mean if you put a roof over your entire backyard, then that wouldn't be outdoor storage? That's sort of like, I'm not sure about that. Approved trash enclosures, like a dumpster or dumpster pad, wouldn't be outdoor storage anyhow. So I
discussed
would
that
just be
before, yeah.
concerned about vehicles, trailers, components, products, and debris. And, well, that's all part of it. So, but fleet company vehicles, equipment attached to fleet company vehicles, that just opens the door that I'm not sure that we know enough to know what that would be. So, based upon our analysis of the site with the gentleman's engineer, I believe the number was like 18% of storage. So 20% was determined based upon going and looking at your regulations, and you allow up to 20% of the area for an accessory building. So here you could have an accessory building for 20%, which you could store some stuff in, and then you can have 20% of outdoor storage, so you'd get up to 40% of storage between the two.
Yeah, you're basically, it's lot coverage is what you're talking about.
Right, it's lot coverage. So but again, my point is, if you got a distinct amount of, you got a certain size building, construction building, let's say, and now you've got X amount of pipes,
Yep.
paneling, whatever you want to be storing, the bigger the lot, the smaller the lot coverage.
I'm thinking of a note you just had, or
Well,
read about is transmissions and so forth from the company that repairs them up on Shaker Road.
Right.
Yeah, and they would be bringing them in and out, and they really have to have a place.
Right.
But 20% is 20%, whether it's 20% of a 1 acre lot or 20% of a 100 acre lot.
Right.
20% of a 100 acre lot is 20 acres.
Right.
Yeah,
So you get a whole lot.
Grows with the size of
But
the
the
lot.
bigger the lot, you get a whole lot more outdoor
of
storage.
course.
Yeah, quick question. With regard to multiple businesses on a site, this would cover help with each, if there were multiple businesses that were in those industrial areas, would that 20%?
It would be up to the landlord to allocate,
Okay.
just like on signage.
Yep.
You regulate the amount of signage on a building, and it's up to the landlord to say how much each tenant gets.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that makes sense coverage-wise, and
I
it
thought-
covers that.
I thought that was covered by Roger saying defined areas or areas.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm building A, she's building B, he's building C. The total of all three buildings is 20% lot coverage, and it's in a specific area, not that quarter, that corner, and over in the side.
Yeah, you can't scatter it.
Yeah.
Okay, any reason then you would close it?
you close it, may I comment?
Yeah, sure, come on up.
I just want to respond, if I may, to some of Roger's comments. First of all, the reason there's no 2 and 4 is because I had no disagreement with 2 and 4 on the.
Yeah, I realized that after I
Yeah,
said
yeah,
it.
yeah. Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Secondly, with respect to the comment about changes to the, Roger's correct, typically, if there's a major change to a published notice of a text amendment, it needs to be republished on that. But it's in my opinion, if you put up to 40%, I wouldn't call that a major change. It's a judgment call. But if I suppose if you wanted to be very, very conservative, you would say that you need to republish it. But what I didn't hear from Roger's comments is, and from some of the Commission's comments, is what is the concern? If you have, let's take it, whether it's 60 acres, 40 acres, 20 acres, if the property is screened, what is the need to limit it? Because what public health, safety, or visible thing to the public? Again, it's a site they're all different in some cases, because in some cases, because of where the property is and where the building is and whatnot, he probably couldn't screen it, in which case it's self-limiting. But if he can screen it in a way where you can't even see the vehicles down there, which is the intent of this, whether it's vehicles or whatever he's got on, why would you want to constrain them? What does the town gain by that? I don't get that. That's why some towns don't have any. They limit it based upon the site and they look at the screening. So I don't think it's like there's some need to hold back. And for instance, that leads me to my next point. Roger is correct. John's present application, because we were required to show at one of our prior hearings what's on the site, I think it's somewhere between 18 and 20% of what is there now. But that doesn't mean, what does he do? That means he's done. If someone moves out, another one moves in, they may want more vehicles there, and he won't be able to do it because they may have 15 vehicles, and when he gets to 3, he's up to 20%. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we had one of our preliminary meetings where Roger was talking in our session when we were trying to talk about a regulation like this, what it would take. And I think we talked about a figure that was 50%. In terms of what a regulation should say. I don't know that ever went anywhere, but the point was, I just want to make it clear that we never said that we want a regulation with only 20%. Yes, that's what we have now, but looking to the future and when this is a dynamic thing, people stay 2 or 3 years, they move out. The point is that there's more room in his site, which is screened, okay, where he might get a tenant who's going to put him, that he's going to have to turn away because he's already at the 20%. And there would be no negative, if he took that tenant in, there wouldn't be any difference in terms of visibility or anything like that to the public. That's our point, and that's going to be the point of other people. And the other people, I'm sure that most of these things are non-conforming, but they're going to be in for a big surprise when if they have a lot that could handle more vehicles, or whatever else you want to store there. I keep saying vehicles, that's the easiest thing to see. So I don't know that there's this public concern that it should be limited to that. And we're not talking I'm talking about John specific, but I'm talking about other industrial users too, because they're going to come. And if someone has an industrial site that doesn't have anything on it now, then that's going to limit what their potential use of their property is as well. And the other thing is, I think the carport. Why I used covered parking as an exclusion is that John does have. How many carports?
20 bays.
When he bought the site, they were there from Salem P. They're not fully enclosed, but they have roofs on them. They're covered.
They're three-sided, aren't they?
How many sided?
Right.
Three-sided, yeah.
Good.
But they're not fully
So they're
enclosed.
not yeah.
And we wanted to be sure that wasn't going to be, in other words, included in that 20% because they're
Well,
covered.
Like I said, those are grandfathered in, so. that's-
Well,
Well, no, but a three-sided carport with cars in it I wouldn't consider outside storage.
Right. And all I wanted,
That's,
but, and that's good to know, but I wanted to clarify that because if Roger, gets elected senator or something like that and leaves next year, I don't know if the next guy's going to think that way.
You're
you know?
right.
Yeah.
you're right.
What do you think the odds of that are?
Not that he want to be senator. So anyway, that's why that's there. But I think, all things considered, there ought to be a definition. Because it's going to be, it's a starting point,
Okay,
That's all I have.
well, maybe that's something we can,
I think I'd agree it's a starting point, and as we move forward, because, the commission has got a long list of things you're having me work on, we could perhaps come up and craft a definition of outdoor storage that would address some of these things. I would just, the commission are not supposed to be looking at a specific site when it's looking at regulations because you're looking at the impact on the entire town. But since we have talked about a specific site, I would just point out that you also changed the major section of the gentleman's site from residential to industrial. And so he does have the opportunity for more outdoor storage because he has more industrial as a result of a previous action by the board. But in general, you have to think about all of the potentials. And as we gain more experience with it, and as we look at other sites as we're moving forward, and as you start changing the zoning regulations, the zoning districts in conjunction with the Plan of Conservation and Development's land use map, if we find that 20% is too restrictive, you can go back and do it. But
we're always concerned about impervious storage and the impervious surface. And
right.
the engineer is always picking that up and making
Right.
sure. And what part some of this could possibly play depends on what's.
Well,
being
it
stored.
depends upon, whether they pave it and pile the stuff on pavement, or they put it on
Let's-
what have you, or it's stored on soils. And, when you come in for your special permit, if you're over an aquifer, that would be considered. And, if you're near a wetland, that would be considered. And so all of the safeguards that you have in your regulations elsewhere in terms of, side yards and setbacks and wetlands and aquifer protection, they would all still apply, and John Cabibbo will be, or if John Cabibbo gets elected senator and his successor, then somebody else will be doing it. But
Okay, close it. Okay, I'll close, let's see, get the right one, 630:02.
Oh, no, that's the part of the thing, it's XA 1702.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, 1702, XZA 1702. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm looking at the
Yeah, the
630.02. Okay.
ordinance number.
I agreed with Roger. I understand, you know.
There's no motion on the floor.
Oh, sorry.
Don't discuss before we vote? Or we gotta have a motion, then discuss?
Yeah, motion and then discuss.
I'd like to make a motion to approve XCA number 1702 zoning text change to Article 6 Industrial District, Section 6.30.2, and with an effective date of 15 days.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded now. Jenny?
I was just going to say, I would feel comfortable voting for it as it was presented to us in our packet, because I'm of the opinion, I'm conservative. I like to see little baby steps, and I think that it's easier to increase and lessen restrictions than it is to pull back once you've opened the door. So I would be voting positively on what we were given in our packet.
Anybody else?
I think I would too, to quote with Jenny, but one of the reasons is, one of the reasons that I have for limitations is we don't want to find a site anymore in town, you know, that has just piles of stuff around and almost like junkyard looking. You see a lot of construction yards like that now.
Yep.
Really are not in you know, they're not in agreement with the rulings for even being a construction yard. And they go in there and they'll have 20 piles of regrind and all kinds of stuff in there, and then they have paths through it to get to their equipment. And so that's the reason why we consider limits on any site. Whether this would happen on any specific site, that we don't know that. But, I think if it looks like it's not working at 20%, you're more than welcome to come back and ask for a 40% change. But you're saying it's not a large change, it's 100% change.
Sure is.
Over 20%. And to do that on a published meeting agenda, I don't think that would be legal. But to reapply in 6 months or something, if you find it's not working, there's nothing wrong with that either. So,
Okay.
I mean, I'm in agreement as well. I think we can always take a look at it later down the road. We've made a good starting point with 20%, and I think that if there is a need, we can increase that. And I do think we do need a definition. I do think at some point we need to address that issue, because that's really important for moving forward with anything that we do. And it's pretty much it for me.
Okay.
and
Motion's
one
on
more
the-
thing about the outdoors, the definition is, again, as you know, you're welcome to come and apply for the definition change on a meeting too, Mr. Attorney Fahey.
We already have, yeah, right. Okay, if you're ready then, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous? Passes. Thank you very much for your input. Let's see.
Okay.
For the outdoors.
Cheryl, I'm sorry?
Motion to adjourn?
Okay.
You got a second that, Jenny?
Second.
All in favor? It's unanimous. Stand adjourned.